Even when the powerhouse GeForce GTX 1080 was released in the middle of 2016, we knew there would be a T version halfway into its life cycle. That's how Nvidia has operated for at least its past 3 product generations. This strategy allows it to hedge against any surprises AMD might pull out of its hat, and also keep things fresh for those who have the money to spend. The top-end T cards are usually slightly cut-down versions of the insanely powerful Titan products that are based on physically larger and more powerful GPUs. Those cards are aimed more at professionals in the content creation and data visualization than at gamers, and are therefore absurdly expensive. That doesn't stop them from being absolute beasts at gaming, though. And so it isn't hard to see the appeal of a T model that offers almost all the performance of its equivalent Titan model at a greatly reduced price. With this current generation of graphics cards, Nvidia has no competition at the top, and therefore no real reason to launch a new flagship, let alone cut the price of its previous one. AMD won't be launching its next-gen Vega-based cards for a few months. So maybe this is Nvidia's way of intimidating its only competitor. Either way, we as buyers get more for our money, so we aren't complaining. Nvidia's product names don't necessarily tell you what's going on behind the scenes. The GeForce GTX 1080 Ti might seem like just a variant or even a higher clocked version of the GeForce GTX 1080, but in reality, the piece of silicone at its heart is completely different. The GTX 1080 and GTX 1070 are siblings, based on a chip codenamed GP104. The lower-priced model just has a few sections disabled and runs slightly slower for a proportionate reduction in power. The GTX 1080 Ti is a similarly cut-down version of the beefier GP102 GPU, which we first saw in last year's Nvidia Titan X. The Titan X's GP102 has 3,584 execution units called CUDA cores grouped into 12 clusters called streaming multiprocessors, and 12 GB of high-speed GDDR5X RAM. Surprisingly, GTX 1080 Ti has the same number, none have been disabled. The difference lies in how these clusters connect to the GPU's cache. While the Titan X has 96 ROPs, raster operation pipelines, and 3 MB of L2 cache, the GTX 1080 Ti loses 1/12 of that capacity, going down to 88 ROPs and 2.8 MB L2 cache. That's also why the new card has 11 GB of GDDR5X RAM on a 352-bit bus instead of the 12 GB of its bigger sibling on a 384-bit bus. Reducing 1/12 of one subsystem's functionality really doesn't seem like enough to differentiate two products, especially if one is priced at $1,200 and the other at $699. Making things more peculiar is the fact that the GeForce GTX 1080 Ti actually runs a little faster than the Titan X. The GPU base and boost speeds are 1480 MHz/1582 MHz versus 1417 MHz/1531 MHz. And the memory is clocked at 11 Gbps versus 10 Gbps, resulting in memory bandwidth of 484 Gbps compared to 480 Gbps. Speaking of memory, Nvidia says that the GTX 1080 Ti uses the fastest ever GDDR5X RAM, thanks to manufacturing process improvements made since the first card to use it, the GTX 1080. Was released last year. Unfortunately, we don't have a Titan X card to test alongside the GTX 1080 Ti, but we'd be surprised if there really was that much of a difference between the two when it comes to gaming. The difference between 11 GB and 12 GB is purely academic. Nvidia's own published materials show that very few of today's games can use more than 8 GB of RAM, and that too only if running at 5K resolution or beyond. The GTX 1080Ti's rated TDP is 250 watts, and you'll need one 8-pin and one 6-pin key power connector. Nvidia has also redesigned its power circuitry, and the new GTX 1080Ti Founders Edition features 7-phase FITs. Unlike with the Titan X, partners such as ASUS, MSI, and Zotac will be able to release their own cards with custom coolers, clock speeds, and other tweaks, so don't be surprised to see overclocked cards with more robust power specifications. Nvidia seems to have realized that its Founders Edition cards are perceived as vanilla options, just as stock cooler models were before the idea of branding them came about. The company has wisely decided not to charge a premium anymore, and so this card carries the same Rs. $63,699 price tag, as custom cards will start at. We tested the GeForce GTX 1080Ti on our brand new AMD Ryzen test rig. While gaming was one of the Ryzen's very few weak points, we're testing exclusively at 4K, and AMD says that potential CPU bottlenecks even out, allowing any GPU to show what it can do. Nvidia provided us with driver version 378.78 for testing prior to its public release. When comparing scores with those of the GeForce GTX 1080 we tested last year, please note that the test bench used was quite different. AMD now has a higher bar to reach if it wants to be competitive with its Vega products this year, and we're looking forward to covering this battle as it unfolds. Till then, this is a great time. Pick up that top-end graphics card you've been itching for. You'll get more for your money with a GTX 1080Ti, or alternatively, you'll save quite a bit by picking up a GTX 1080 Founders Edition card for somewhere near its new recommended price of Rs. 45,000. Don't even bother with the Nvidia Titan X, which sells for well over $1 lakh. Whatever marginal improvement there might be just isn't worth it, even if you need compute power for jobs other than gaming. The GeForce GTX 1080Ti is more than enough for pushing 4K at around 60 FPS, and that carries over to smaller high refresh rate monitors and even VR headsets.